After 10 years at my alpha boss's side, I finally decided to leave. When I handed in my resignation, he frowned, clearly displeased. "Why are you leaving?" I glanced at the wedding ring on his right hand and forced myself to sound calm. "I'm getting married soon. My husband wants me to move away with him." He fell silent for a long time, his knuckles turning pale from how tightly he gripped his pen. On my last day, he wished me a bland, "Congratulations on your marriage." I didn't look back. My hand drifted gently to my lower belly. Thankfully, I was only a beta. He had no idea I was carrying his child. Time rewinds to a few days earlier. When I woke up, Lucian Kingsley was still asleep. Dragging my exhausted body, I quickly cleaned up the entire room. As I picked up our clothes from the floor, flashes of last night came rushing back. Lucian, blindfolded with a tie, pinning me hard against the door. "Corin, Corin." He wasn't calling my name. I froze for a moment, a dull ache spreading behind my ribs. My heart felt as if it had been soaked in something sharp and bitter. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol and his pheromones. His heated kisses had trailed from the curve of my ear down to the back of my neck. His sharp canines pressed lightly against my skin, as if he might leave a mark. I knew I should stop him. After all, I wasn't the one he wanted. But I hesitated. Shamefully. Just in that second, his pheromones had already seeped into my body. I wrapped my arms around his waist, breathing him in greedily. With my eyes closed, I thought, just for one night, let me have you just once. And once I let myself fall, there was no turning back. Because I truly, hopelessly liked him. Wanting to make sure he wouldn't notice anything when he woke, I slipped out of the hotel as fast as I could. Back at my rented apartment, I pushed through the discomfort to clean myself up, only to realize I had a fever. My whole body was burning. I forced myself to request leave from HR, then collapsed onto the bed. When I next opened my eyes, 3 days had passed. My voice was still hoarse, and faint traces of his kisses lingered on my neck. I didn't pay much attention to them. I changed quickly and headed out the door. As I approached the secretary office, I overheard snippets of conversation. "Alden's been with the company 10 years, and this is his first long leave. With him gone, the boss looks totally distracted. You think something's going on between them? What are you talking about? If something were going to happen, it would have happened ages ago. Alden's just considerate and reliable. The boss is used to having him around. Please, with an alpha like the boss, he'll end up marrying into another powerful family. There's no way he'd ever look at someone like Alden, a beta. They're not even close to being a match." The spot on my neck throbbed faintly. I steadied myself and pushed open the door, handing them their coffee. "Something came up at home, so I took a few days off. Sorry for the trouble." The room fell instantly quiet. Everyone looked embarrassed. I didn't bother defending myself. A bitterness stung the back of my throat, because nothing they said was wrong. Lucian had always disliked betas. I only managed to join the company because we were once schoolmates. Otherwise, someone like me, a beta, would never have been allowed through these doors, much less allowed to foolishly hope for anything more. Today, Lucian had a major merger meeting with the Zhou group. Normally, I would accompany him without question. And today, I didn't want to miss it. I gathered the documents and knocked on the CEO's office door. "Come in." Lucian lifted his gaze, his dark eyes locking onto me, as if he had been waiting for me to appear every day I was gone. I set the documents on his desk, but he suddenly asked, "Where have you been these past few days?" My hand paused. I caught a faint trace of his pheromones lingering in the air. I didn't dare look him in the eye. "My family member got sick. I went home to take care of him." Hearing that, Lucian frowned. "You mean, your partner?" I froze for a second, then nodded. Last year, rumors about me and Lucian had flooded the company. To stop suspicion, and to keep my job, I lied, saying I already had a partner and felt nothing for Lucian. The gossip eventually died down, and no one dared speculate about him again. As his secretary, I thought I had handled the situation flawlessly, but Lucian hadn't seemed pleased. I never understood why. I assumed I simply hadn't done well enough. Now, that lie became the perfect excuse for my leave. Lucian never made things difficult for employees with families. I explained half-truthfully, he had a high fever. He wasn't doing well, so I went back to take care of him. Lucian's voice dropped. "So you left me waiting in that hotel room all night, and you didn't come?" In his tone was something faint, a quiet frustration and something that sounded suspiciously like jealousy. His gaze was so direct that I had no choice but to lower my head. "Sorry, that was my fault." Such a weak explanation could never convince him. That morning, when Lucian woke up, he felt strangely off. For example, there were a couple of shallow scratch marks on his right shoulder, a faint bite mark around his wrist, and the room was unusually clean for someone who had drunk that much. His head ached slightly, as if he'd forgotten something important. When he went to ask the front desk, the staff insisted that no one had entered his room the night before. Maybe he had just sleepwalked. Lucian did have a history of sleepwalking, so he let the matter drop. But after he went home, a heaviness formed in his chest. He realized, far too late, that it was the first time Alden hadn't come to pick him up. No matter how late his business dinners ran, Alden always arrived first, waiting quietly for him. Lucian felt like a child on his first day of school, looking forward only to that one familiar figure, someone he could lean on after a long night, someone who smelled faintly of gardenia. It made him feel safe and content. But that night, Alden didn't show up. Something sour and aggrieved settled in Lucian's chest. He waited 3 whole days, every day, hoping for an explanation. But now that he'd heard it, he almost wished he hadn't. Lucian's eyes drifted over me, as if trying to see straight through me. I kept my attention fixed on the documents, forcing myself to stay calm. I checked the numbers again and again, unsure whether he was even listening. Then, right as we were finishing up, he suddenly asked, "Your partner, is he a good person? Good enough for you to abandon work and stay with him 3 full days and nights?" My breath hitched. I forced myself to nod. Turning my head, I stared at his reflection in the glass wall. He's gentle, patient, very capable at work. He's a genuinely good person. In my mind, I imagined that person could be Lucian. Without realizing it, even my tone softened slightly. But I didn't notice that with each sentence I spoke, Lucian's expression grew tighter, until his eyes locked onto the faint pink mark on my neck. Then he couldn't hold back anymore. "That's enough," he said coldly. Hearing the irritation in his voice, I instantly shut my mouth. I had overstepped. He was only asking casually. He wasn't actually interested in my personal life. Lucian's brows were drawn, his jaw tense. He was upset. I took the hint and stepped out, but just as I reached the door, I heard him say, "For this afternoon's merger meeting, you won't be coming with me. Hand everything over to Foster from the executive office." The same newcomer who had just mocked me for being a beta. Lowering my eyes, I responded quietly, "Okay." My body hadn't been well these days. A lingering fever, and Lucian hadn't really spoken to me. Everyone said Foster was probably going to replace me. Several events I usually handled had been reassigned to him by Lucian. His confidence grew, and his attitude toward me became more and more arrogant. "Alden, did you forget last quarter's report again? Getting old has really messed with your memory, huh? Well, I guess betas like you are just limited like this. No matter how hard you work, you can't compare to us. But hey, we're co-workers. I won't hold anything against you. After I take your position someday, I'll still rely on you to teach me a thing or two." He smiled innocently, but his eyes brimmed with smug confidence. After all, the secretary position had always been filled by Omegas. I was the only exception. Everyone believed I got in through some backdoor connection. They didn't know that I had graduated from one of the top universities in the country, and that I survived layer after layer of selection before I earned my place beside Lucian. In terms of ability, I never thought I was inferior. Looking at the arrogant Omega in front of me, I slowly tipped the remaining coffee in my cup onto his brand new suit. The expensive fabric was instantly soaked, leaving him looking completely disheveled. I smiled thinly. "That's how I'll rely on you." With that, I turned and walked away without a shred of hesitation. Foster's face went green. He was about to come after me when someone stopped him. "Hey, don't mess with Secretary Wen. You'll get yourself killed. He's been with the boss 10 years. You think you can compete with that?" Someone once bumped into him by accident. One bump, and the boss fired him the next day and blacklisted him from the industry. "Watch yourself." The voices grew quieter and quieter. I sighed silently, hoping my body would recover soon. Maybe Lucian was just unhappy with my work. The Cold War between us dragged on for a while, until a week later, when it began to pour. I had forgotten my umbrella, and Lucian just happened to be downstairs. "Get in." His voice was stiff. I hesitated, but eventually got in the car. The heater was on, and a faint trace of his pheromones lingered in the air. My face warmed as the memories of that night surfaced. I turned my head away. Lucian watched me from the corner of his eye, lips pressed into a thin line. "Afraid your boyfriend will misunderstand?" "What?" The question caught me off guard. "You've been covering your nose this whole time, like you're avoiding me. You worried my pheromones will make your boyfriend unhappy?" I wondered if he was overthinking things, so I turned toward him and explained, "No, I just haven't been feeling well lately. I think I've become a little sensitive to pheromones." Lucian's shoulders relaxed. His entire expression softened. "Oh, I thought you hated me." His tone was casual, but the words rippled straight through my chest. I didn't dare look at him again. When we reached my apartment building, he got out of the car with me. I blinked in confusion. Listen, why aren't you going back? Leaning against his Rolls-Royce, Lucen's eyes searched mine. Alden, after all these years, you're not going to invite me up. Besides, I'd like to meet your boyfriend. My eyelids twitched. I hadn't expected him to pull something like this tonight. I stumbled over my words, for once completely thrown off. He's not available today. Lucen frowned, clearly not buying it. I tried again. I'm the one who's not available. I'm not feeling well. Lucen's mouth tipped up slightly as he slipped an arm around me and steered me forward. You're not feeling well. All the more reason for your boss to check on you. Perfectly reasonable. Before I knew it, we were already standing at my front door. He looked straight at me, silently urging me to unlock it. A thin layer of sweat gathered on my forehead. My hands trembled. The key turned. The door opened. Before I could step inside, a man's voice called out, Alden, you're back. Lucen and I froze instantly. Hale stood in the kitchen wearing my gray apron, cooking as if he lived here. Got company? He asked so casually. Lucen's expression darkened to a shade I had never seen. I nodded quickly and pushed him inside. He sat down on the couch, stiff as a board, not knowing what to do with himself. You already have someone here? He asked. I avoided his eyes. Yeah, he probably just got back. Lucen pressed his lips together, saying nothing more. I hurried to change clothes and slipped into the kitchen. Hale was tending to a pot of soup. I whispered, what are you doing here? He lowered his head. My mom made chicken soup and told me to bring it over to you. Hale's mother. I actually hadn't visited her in a long time. Back when I moved to City A in high school, Hale became my neighbor. My family wasn't doing well then, and his mom often helped us out, sending Hale over with food or supplies. After countless visits, Hale and I naturally grew close. Through the years, he became one of my few real friends. His mother and mine were close as well. Even now, despite her age, she still worries about me. Because of that, she often asks Hale to check in. To make things easier, I gave him a spare key. I never expected, tonight of all nights, that he'd walk right into this mess. Hale ladled some soup and asked softly, try it, see if you like it. His slightly husky voice pulled me back to the present. I pressed my lips together, tasted a sip. It's really good. Hale smiled. As long as you like it. He returned the ladle to the pot and shifted to the right. Hale was an alpha, tall, broad-shouldered, and my rented kitchen was tiny. With that small movement, I found myself nearly completely enclosed by his presence. The chicken soup simmered with soft bubbling sounds, its warmth drifting all the way into the living room. And to Lucen, it felt like he was being thrown into that same pot, left to boil. He prided himself on staying calm, but every glance toward the kitchen made an unfamiliar agitation twist inside him. Was that level of closeness necessary? Then he reminded himself, they're a couple. It's normal. Lucen clenched his jaw, wondering why he had followed me here just to make himself miserable. He turned away. Involuntarily, he imagined himself in that kitchen, standing behind me, arms loosely around my waist, shoulder against mine, cooking together in a quiet, shared warmth. He jerked himself out of it almost immediately. He shouldn't, be indulging in thoughts about someone who wasn't his. He only came because he heard I was ill. He only wanted to check on a subordinate. That was all. Lucen shut his eyes and rubbed his forehead, visibly unsettled. All of his wandering thoughts came to a hard stop when Hale called out, Mr. Lucen, would you like to stay for dinner? It was phrased politely, but the distance in his tone was unmistakable. Lucen knew it was a polite way of showing him the door. He grabbed his coat and forced a casual tone. No, I have things to take care of at home. He took only a few steps outside when a loud slam echoed behind him. Lucen curled his hand into a fist and silently vowed that he wasn't coming back. Ever. He had barely settled into his car when his phone rang. Lucen, I'm flying back home soon. Last night, while cooking, I had asked Hale to check with Lucen about his food preferences. I didn't expect Lucen to leave. A wave of relief washed through me, followed by a strange, lingering disappointment. Maybe it was for the best. Pretending in front of him was exhausting. Even so, dinner didn't taste like much that night. Maybe I just hadn't been sleeping well. The next day at work, I still had no energy. During lunch break, I overheard colleagues chatting in the break room. They said that in a couple of days, the company would be getting a new VP, a returning overseas hire, and more importantly, that this Omega was meant to be Lucen's arranged partner. Foster sneered the moment he heard it. That Omega only has family influence. Doesn't mean they have real ability. Even if there's an arranged match, it might not last. After mocking them, he glanced at my tired face and added, Secretary Alden, you look exhausted lately, like you're pregnant or something. When that big shot arrives, we'll all be busy. Better get yourself together. On his way out, he accidentally rammed into my left shoulder, deliberately hard. I stood frozen, face draining of color. Can a beta even get pregnant? I honestly wasn't sure. The next day, I went to the hospital. The doctor told me I was pregnant. He explained that the fatigue and discomfort were normal early symptoms and that I just needed rest. In this world where only alphas and omegas release pheromones, a beta conceiving was extremely rare. But rare didn't mean impossible. If the partner was an S-rank alpha, and if there was a strong emotional bond, then even without pheromones, a beta could conceive. But unlike omegas, a beta could only form a single gestational sac, meaning, a beta could have only one child in their entire life. If I ended the pregnancy, I would never have another child again. The doctor told me to think it through carefully. I stared at the tiny dark dot on the report, and a humorless laugh escaped me. It was absurd, beyond absurd. Supporting my head with one hand, memories from that night surged up. Lussen had held me from behind, arms locked around me, his emotions overwhelming. He had been desperate, intense, trying to pull me closer, to share warmth rather than anything physical. So much so that I didn't notice anything else. At some point, I tried to get away, panic, confusion, everything tangled together. But he caught my ankle and pulled me back into his arms. He had been upset, his movements urgent, his voice thick with emotion. Don't go, okay? My sweetheart, my love. I like you so much, Corin. But I wasn't Corin. I had been the one borrowing someone else's place in his heart. So this child, I couldn't keep. After hesitating for a long time, I booked the termination. And right then, my phone rang. Lussen's voice came through, low and steady, but tense. Alden, where are you? I knew he had no idea what was going on, yet tension still coiled tight in my chest. I gripped my phone, forcing calm into my voice. Just picking up some documents. Next neighborhood over. I hadn't taken leave. I'd only slipped out on a small excuse. Because if Lussen learned I had taken actual time off, he would ask questions. And questions were the last thing I could afford. Lussen didn't notice anything wrong. Instead, he added casually, then head to the airport and pick up Corin. The moment I heard that name, every instinct wanted to refuse. But refusing would only make him look into where I really was. My fingers tightened around the phone. Okay. And just like that, the person I was sent to fetch, turned out to be the soon-to-arrive new vice president. Corin greeted me the second he got into the car, all smiles. Alden, long time no see. I gave him a small nod. He wasn't bothered by my short response. Corin rarely cared what betas thought. In the rearview mirror, I glanced at him again, refined, confident, effortlessly striking. Of course, he was the one people believed Lussen truly cared about. And just like that, old memories resurfaced. When we were still students, I had once been Corin's assistant, a polite name for something closer to a paid errand runner. He had just returned to his wealthy family then, hot-tempered and reckless, offending half the school on a weekly basis. Most alphas refused to guard him. Only I, a broke beta desperate for hospital bills, stepped forward. Corin was temperamental, but generous with money. Every time I ended up bruised because of him, there would be a deposit waiting. Those funds kept my mother's treatment going. Later, when things stabilized at home, I stopped working for him. I thought he would forget me. He didn't. Instead, he grew angry. And for months, he found every excuse to make trouble, tearing up my books, provoking fights with his alpha bodyguards, anything to force me back into orbit. Then one day, he met Lussen. Both came from prominent families. To maintain his polished public image, Corin stopped targeting me. And rumors quickly spread that Lussen liked him. They graduated, went abroad, and the rumor faded. Lussen returned years later to inherit the family business. Corin stayed overseas. And now, apparently, they were about to reunite. As we neared the company, Corin suddenly told me to stop the car. He ordered a honey cake for Lussen, his favorite. But when I returned with the box, Corin yanked me into a narrow alley. His fingers seized my tie, and the elegance on his face twisted. You're trying to seduce him, aren't you? The attack came so sharply I froze. There's his scent on you, Corin hissed. Don't pretend you can't smell it. My breath stalled. As a beta, my sense of smell wasn't strong, and the trace Lussen left more than a month ago should have faded to nothing. Yet Corin spoke like he knew everything. He slapped the cake out of my hands. Cream splattered over my shoes. Stay away from Lussen. His eyes sharpened. Alden, you wouldn't want him finding out what you've been hiding, right? My heart lurched. Long ago, Corin had found a letter I wrote to Lussen. A clumsy, naive confession I never sent. He didn't tear it up. He kept it. And he told me, with a smile, that Lussen hated betas. That if he ever learned a pathetic little beta had feelings for him, he'd be disgusted. Corin leaned closer, whispering the same cruelty he used years ago. That I was lowborn, unworthy, laughable. That he still had those old photos. The ones of me beaten, bloodied, humiliated, and he would make sure Lucen saw them. If I dared appear at his side again. Then he heard footsteps approaching. Corin stepped on the ruined cake, walked out into the sunlight, and in an instant, his face transformed. Bright smile, gentle tone, a perfect young master. Lucen, he chirped sweetly, linking arms with him. Let me buy you a cake. Lucen frowned and gently pulled his arm free, glancing back. But the alley behind him was empty. I stayed in the shadows, unable to move. Autumn wind cut through the narrow passage, cold and damp. My hand pressed to the sore bump at the back of my neck. Still warm. What difference did being a beta make, really? I never believed I was lesser, but in front of Lucen, I didn't dare gamble anything. The wall beside me was covered in moss. Dark, damp, hidden from sunlight, just like me. I touched my abdomen, making a quiet decision. My mother was gone. I had only myself now. Leaving a city wouldn't be hard. I packed everything overnight. The next morning, I handed Lucen my resignation. For him, it felt abrupt. Alden, he said, brows tight, fingers tapping the desk. A rare sign of agitation. Give me a reason. Only then did I notice the ring on his hand. The wedding band. I looked away. I'm getting married, I said softly. My partner wants me to leave with him. Lucen's brows tightened further. Married? You never mentioned that. It's his idea, I answered. I don't think it's a bad one. He stared at me, long and silent, something heavy settling in his eyes. At last he said, Alden, I don't believe you're someone who abandons your career for marriage. Even if you do marry, you can continue working with the company, or I can transfer you anywhere you want. Lucen rarely sounded uncertain. Hearing it now startled me. Maybe he simply wasn't used to losing his assistant of nearly a decade. I explained that most of my tasks had already been shifted to Foster. There would be no disruption, but that seemed to make him even more unhappy. He gripped his pen so tightly his knuckles whitened. Finally, I spoke plainly. Lucen, I've followed you for almost 10 years. Only recently did I realize, this isn't the life I want. I should have the right to choose my own path. So, I won't be coming back. I placed the resignation letter on his desk. For a moment, something in Lucen's expression fractured. His chest rose and fell, as if the air had turned cold. I reached the door when his voice stopped me. Alden. His tone was rough, almost unsteady. My fingers curled. Was it about the hospital? Did he notice something? I touched my abdomen discreetly, breath tight. He asked, do you really like your husband that much? Relief washed over me. Not that. It's not important, I said. But yes, I like him. Lucen lowered his eyes. I see. When I returned to my desk to pack up, co-workers gathered to say goodbye. Young, kind people I'd watched grow. One by one, they hugged me tearfully. Only in front of Lucen did I feel awkward. He stood straight, hands in his pockets, not offering a hug. I stepped back and hugged the colleague beside him instead. Something flickered over his face. A brief, quiet disappointment. In the end, he only said one thing, voice steady, expression unreadable. Congratulations, on your marriage. I had already booked my ticket home on the day I left the city. What I didn't expect was that Hale planned to return too. He was one of the very few people who knew about my pregnancy. The shock hit him at first, but he accepted it quicker than I did. In the days that followed, he became more attentive, gentler than before. Watching him run around for me, I often felt guilty. After all, I had used him as a shield, and he discovered that sooner than I thought. One afternoon, after I finished taking a walk with his mother, Hale stopped me before I could leave. His dark eyes held something, hopeful. Alden, he said quietly, you told someone I was your husband. I froze, ears burning with embarrassment, and apologized right away. But Hale didn't seem upset. In fact, he smiled a little and added, if it helps, I don't mind being your shield, for as long as you need. My mind stalled for a moment. Seeing the confusion on my face, Hale grew flustered too. I mean, maybe we could try something. Something, more than friends. It wasn't smooth, but I understood him. I lowered my gaze and stepped back. Hale forced a smile, swallowing whatever emotion rose in his chest. It's fine. We're still friends, right? He said it sincerely, though his eyes trembled with caution. Thinking of the years he and his mother had taken care of me, I nodded. I didn't have many friends. I wasn't going to lose one now. Hale left that day with a heavy heart. Alden always carried a soft, distant coolness. Gentle, polite, yet somehow unreachable. Hale had once been too brash to approach him. so they stayed ordinary friends. Later, Hale wanted to improve, earn more, build a better life. He worked too hard, trusted the wrong people, and ended up in prison for a few years. During those years, his mother fell seriously ill. It was Alden who took care of her alone, even quitting his stable job to cover the medical bills, eventually forcing himself into Kingsley Group, a company that never hired betas. By the time Hale got out, embarrassed and uncertain, Alden had already become someone reliable, capable, too good, he felt, for someone like him. He was content simply watching over him from a distance, until a few days ago, when he met Lucien outside Alden's building. Lucien, sharp suit, sharp tongue, looked him up and down, and implied he was uneducated, unreliable, and unfit to be anyone's husband. Hale was stunned, then the meaning hit him. Alden had said publicly that Hale was his husband, even if it was a lie. That meant something, didn't it? The thought inflated his chest. He shot Lucien a smug look, grabbed Alden's things out of his hands, and strode upstairs without looking back. He had grown now, strong enough to protect him openly. Back in my hometown, I took a job at a small charity-run elementary school. Maybe it was the pregnancy, but every child seemed sweeter than I remembered. When Hale wasn't busy, he often came to pick me up, helping me shop for groceries, talking about the future. When the baby's born, he'd say, "Mom can be the grandma, and I'll be the godfather. We'll raise the little one together. Just a peaceful, happy life." I thought about it. It sounded comforting. The only thing that worried me was Hale's mother's health. One evening, after I finished helping her with her exercises, I went home early. It began raining past midnight. A sudden knock echoed at my door. I jumped out of bed, assuming Hale needed something, but when I opened the door, I froze. Lucien stood in the dim hallway of the old apartment building, rain in his hair, suit soaked at the shoulders, eyes clouded like he'd wandered out of a storm. My hand tightened on the doorframe. Time stopped between us. Then his gaze dropped, to the small rise of my stomach. A thin red washed into his eyes. Something like ache, like heartbreak. Instinct jolted through me. I turned, trying to shut the door, but he caught it, and pushed his way inside. The next second, he wrapped his arms around me, damp with rain, trembling with breath he couldn't steady. He was tall, solid. I had to tip onto my toes, supporting myself against him. His face pressed into the curve of my neck. His shoulders shuddered, and something warm fell onto my skin. His voice broke. "Alden, I'm sorry." After I left, Lucien never adjusted. Every morning, he still pressed the extension line, the one I always answered. Alden never ate breakfast on time. Once, he'd gotten sick because of it. Lucien felt the pain more sharply than he expected. So for years, he used his authority to force us to eat breakfast together, a secret no one else in the company knew. Now, there was no one to answer. No small notes on his desk. No tiny potted plant Alden stubbornly kept alive beside his monitor. He realized he would never again see me appear with a cup of coffee, smiling gently as if the entire day could start only when I walked in. The emptiness pressed like damp cotton against his chest. He tried to find a reason to see me again, going to my building to return a pen I left behind, rehearsing excuses in his car. He wanted to ask where I was moving. Maybe business would take him there. Maybe our paths would cross again. But before he reached my door, he ran into my husband, a man with a casual, roughened air, nothing like the polished elites Lucien knew. Jealousy spiked so sharply he nearly choked on it. That man snatched the pen from his hand, and walked upstairs with a swagger. Lucien had no reason left to follow. That night, he drank until the world blurred, and in that haze, he caught Foster, the assistant who had once drugged him, trying to do it again. From that confrontation, the truth unraveled. The night Alden abandoned him was real. Alden was the one he had called for, the one he had held on to, but the drug had caused partial memory loss. He only recalled fragments, and every time he asked, Alden denied it so completely that his pride refused to question again. After Foster's arrest, every missing piece fell into place. He learned that the illness he felt wasn't illness at all. It was his body reacting too strongly to a scent he shouldn't have been exposed to. He learned that he had been the one to hurt Alden. And then, he learned of the baby. The doctor told him directly. Lucien couldn't describe the feeling. Like winning a prize he'd waited his whole life for, only to realize the ticket had expired. He searched for Alden like a man possessed. But there was nothing. No trace. Then, 3 months later, a lead appeared. He flew south immediately. But when he saw an alpha by Alden's side, fear clenched around his ribs. Alden said he loved his husband. And Lucien was the person who hurt him most. He remembered the fragments of that night, how Alden kept turning his face away, Listen, an S-class alpha, was someone a beta couldn't escape. And he understood. He had forced someone who never had a chance to push him away. Alden could never love him now. With that belief carved into him, Listen spent days watching from afar. Obsessive, desperate, but too afraid to get close. Until tonight, when a neighbor casually mentioned that Alden wasn't married, that Hale was simply a friend. It hit him like a miracle. Listen stood there in the rain, stunned, breathless, like someone who had just been handed back his entire world. And that same night, he climbed the stairs. He had to see Alden. Had to, because Alden, in the deepest part of his heart, was his. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I couldn't help thumping his shoulder twice in protest. Listen loosened his grip just a little, though he still refused to let go. Then he asked, Alden, was it very painful that night? Since he had managed to track me down here, he probably knew most of what had happened. I thought for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, it did hurt. Your bite was really sharp. The mark on the back of my neck still hadn't fully healed. Listen froze in place, then leaned in to nuzzle me softly. I'm sorry, he continued, these past days, you must have had a hard time. The doctor had said before that betas weren't suited for pregnancy. If I truly carried a child, the discomfort could be worse than what an omega would go through. I frowned slightly, thinking it over. A bit tough, yeah. At first I had to outsmart the local pickpockets and con artists. Then I couldn't sleep at night for a while. Lately I've probably reacted badly to the climate here. I've broken out in a rash and it gets itchy at night. Fortunately, the baby isn't big yet and isn't giving me trouble, so it's manageable. Hearing that, Listen began crying again. I looked at him with mild irritation, thinking to myself that alphas really were too sensitive. Betas were far more emotionally stable by comparison. I'm sorry, Alden, he repeated. I sighed and waited for him to calm down. Half an hour passed, and he still wasn't planning to release me. I finally had to push him away. His eyes were swollen from crying, and his face was flushed from burying himself against my neck for so long. I turned to pick up a dry towel and gently wiped his hair and face. Listen trailed after me like some clingy shadow, as if scared I would vanish again. I told him to sit, but he tugged the corner of my shirt and asked in a cautious voice, Why did you tell me you were married when you were already pregnant? He was painfully direct. My hand paused. I looked away toward the window. On the wooden sill sat a pot of white gardenias I had planted myself. Outside, the light rain tapped softly against the plane tree leaves. My heart felt exactly like that, uneasy, trembling. Lowering my gaze, I hesitated before saying, Because I think I liked you, just a little. My voice was quiet, yet it hit Listen like a thunderclap. But soon after, I delivered the verdict. But you don't like me, so I decided to leave. And now, you're not that important anymore. I set the towel aside and stopped touching him. After I left Listen, I realized that not missing him wasn't all that difficult. I had no family, no child, no one. So for many years, the only person who offered me even a little kindness was Listen, the man people called my boss. Maybe all this time, I had simply used him as a place to store emotions I didn't know where else to put. But now, I would soon have a child connected to me by blood. With family of my own, Listen no longer mattered. So even if he learned about the shameful thoughts I once had, I no longer feared anything. If it's not important, then it no longer hurts. Listen's voice trembled, half bitter, half hopeful, as he rushed out. I never disliked you. I like you, Alden. I was afraid you wouldn't like me. He sounded like a nervous student awaiting the results of an exam. My lashes trembled, but I only replied calmly, Thank you, for liking me, but I may not need that anymore. The rain stopped, and the room fell into a deep, echoing silence. In such stillness, no emotion had anywhere to hide. He lowered his head and saw my eyes, quiet, steady, unshaken. Neither joy nor sorrow. No ripples at all. His heart seemed to sink to the bottom of a lake, swelling with a dull ache. Listen finally understood. Alden would no longer be moved by him. Because he was no longer important. He couldn't remember how he walked downstairs. All he knew was that every step away from me hurt. Standing outside, Listen's hands were cold, as if he had never touched me at all. And at that moment, he realized. A winning lottery ticket past its expiration date could never be cashed. He had confessed too late. Just as he learned where my heart once leaned, we were already pulling apart. After Listen left, a faint scent of pine lingered in the room. He'd been too emotional earlier and had unconsciously released his pheromones. But strangely, the discomfort I usually felt before bed didn't come tonight. I slept peacefully, so peacefully that I even dreamed of him. In the dream, Listen was 18 again. He suddenly appeared behind me, touched the piano keys, and corrected the notes I'd played wrong. I turned around slowly and saw a young man in a tailcoat. He asked shyly if I would play a duet with him. My ears warmed, and I nodded. Back then, I was withdrawn and had few friends. The summer camp instructor insisted I find a partner for the performance. Lucen appeared just in time to save me from that trouble. He was lively, with many friends, and I wasn't sure he would actually choose me. But before the performance could happen, I left the camp. That summer, my mother fell ill. My father divorced her. He had been a strong alpha once, but he couldn't mark my mother. She was like me, a beta without pheromones or glands. While on a work trip, he got drunk and accidentally marked an omega. My mother learned of it and demanded a divorce. My father claimed the omega had deliberately lured him with pheromones, that he had only acted on instinct. He said as long as they didn't divorce, his love for us wouldn't change. But my mother felt sickened. After all, an AO bond meant she would have to share her husband's instincts for the rest of her life. When her illness worsened, my father vanished, taking all our money with him. A species unable to control its instincts. Truly disgusting, I thought. Then, at the hospital, I turned around and saw Lucen, newly differentiated as an alpha. He looked like he wanted to greet me, but the hostility in my eyes frightened him. I projected my anger onto him, and eventually he fled from me. I thought he might retaliate someday. After all, he was from a prestigious family. But unexpectedly, the money that slipped casually through the fingers of the Kingsley family ended up saving my mother. Lucen's first birthday as an alpha was spent in the hospital. His grandfather celebrated by donating a large sum to every ward in the building. 50,000 per room, exactly enough for my mother's surgery. After her operation, Lucen disappeared again. Later, my mother and I moved away. I once thought about writing him a letter to apologize, but without an address, the letter eventually turned into several clumsy love confessions instead. Worse, Corin stole them. When Lucen returned from England, we were strangers again. Even though we went to the same school, we never acknowledged each other. Only when Corin came to bother me would I occasionally catch sight of Lucen. He always stood beside Corin, giving me a disdainful look, as if I were disturbing their date. It annoyed me, and I stopped wanting to look at him altogether. But with him there, Corin had to keep up appearances and stopped picking on me. Those days were surprisingly quiet. After graduation, we went our separate ways again. Until Hale was arrested, and his mother fell seriously ill. To help pay for her treatment, I quit my job and applied to the largest corporation in the capital. Coincidentally, that year the company loosened its hiring restrictions and began accepting betas based on merit. And by pure chance, my interviewer that year was Lucen. Fate turned a page, and there he was again. He always appeared at my lowest, when I was struggling the most. And with one simple gesture, he would lift the weight off my shoulders. It felt like we were always far apart, yet somehow he was everywhere. Like the early morning I walked downstairs and saw him leaning against his Maybach. Lucen smiled gently. "Alden, let me drive you to work." I never agreed to let him drive me, so I took the subway as usual. I didn't expect Lucen to follow, yet there he was, squeezing into the crowded train with me. By the time we got off, his midnight blue tailored suit had been wrinkled beyond recognition. After work, I went grocery shopping with Hale. Lucen tagged along again. The whole chaotic scene ended only when he stepped on chicken droppings, slipped, and fell straight into a fish tank. Laughter rippled through the market. He scrambled to his feet, drenched and stunned. In the past, moments like this were handled by me, his assistant. But now, I wasn't. He stood there, a spectacle for strangers. I looked at him, lips parting, but in the end, I said nothing. When we were near Hale's mother's place, Hale went upstairs first. Lucen kept his distance from me, probably because he still smelled strongly of fish. I frowned and snapped, my tone sharp. "Don't you care about your dignity?" His eyes reddened as he shot back. "Will dignity bring you back to me?" The wind howled past us, blowing the tears from his lashes onto my cheek. I exhaled slowly. "Lucen, I'm not going to be with you. To be exact, I won't accept any alpha partner. I'm just a beta. No pheromones, no scent, nothing that can bond. You're only acting like this because you're not used to being without me. One day you'll meet an omega who matches you perfectly. You'll feel the pull. You'll realize that's what you really want. So why make this harder for the both of us?" But Lucen said firmly, "I won't. I would never betray you." My eyelids twitched. I lifted my gaze. His eyes, dark as obsidian, held a frightening determination. "Alden, just look at me. I won't let you down." This time, it was me who couldn't find the words. I turned away and went upstairs. I thought he'd give up after that. But a week later, he appeared again. During a heavy rainstorm, he knocked on my door. He was soaked, but his eyes were clear. Yet the words that came out of his mouth stunned me completely. "Alden, I had my gland removed." I froze, unable to respond. He blinked, his voice faint. "Alden, hold me." The moment my hand touched his, he pulled me into a full embrace. Soon I caught the scent, pine and cypress, rich and familiar. He held a small glass vial in his hand. Inside it was his pheromone sample. "The doctor said it might make your pregnancy easier," he murmured. "So I saved some for you. If you feel unwell later, open it." He placed it in my palm. The glass was still warm from his touch, as if he had placed his heart directly into my hands. It burned. I stared at him, overwhelmed. "Why would you do that?" He bent slightly, lowering himself to my eye level. "Please, trust me. Trust his sincerity. Trust his loyalty." Then I saw the fresh wound at the back of his neck and quickly said, "I trust you. I trust you. Just, don't hurt yourself again." Seeing me soften, he pressed on. "If you trust me, let's get married, okay? But aren't you already engaged?" I glanced at the ring hanging from his neck, the one he'd been wearing the day I left. Listen frowned. "Who said that?" He took it off and pushed it onto my ring finger, firm and unyielding. "It's yours. My mom gave this to me so I could chase after the one I love. The day you left, I wanted to give it to you." He coughed awkwardly and added, "If you were really getting married, maybe hiding my ring on you would let me feel like I was part of your wedding somehow. Maybe I could pretend it was me marrying you instead. But you said you loved your husband so much, so I got angry and didn't want to give it to you anymore." Then he smirked. "Good thing you lied to me." My heart trembled, just a little, and I finally asked, "What about Corin? Weren't you two supposed to form an alliance?" Lucen's face was instantly filled with disgust. "Why would I do that? I don't even like him. Our family isn't weak enough to need a political marriage. That whole thing was because..." He paused, then decided to be honest. "You used to hate alphas, right? When you told me you hated me at the hospital, later when I transferred schools, you refused to see me. Corin told me he was your friend. So I thought, if I stayed close to him, I could see you." Each word dropped into my heart like syrup. Sweet, sour, dizzying. Blood seeped again from the wound on the back of his neck. I turned to get the medical kit. While bandaging him, I felt a pang of pain on his behalf. But Lucen didn't care about any of that. He only cared about one final question. "Alden, did you see the message I sent you the year we graduated?" My hands paused. Quietly, I said, "I saw it." He had found the number I left at summer camp and messaged me. He said he was leaving the country soon and wanted to see me before he left. I rarely used that phone number, but that day, by chance, it was turned on. I read his message and rushed to the airport, but on the way, I learned my mother had passed away. I never made it to the airport. I went to see her, one last time. When I finished speaking, Lucen's eyes turned red again. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He hadn't seen me that day and resented me for years. Later, he smashed his phone, and I lost the only way to reach him. We blamed each other, thinking the other didn't care enough, until enough time passed for all the anger to fade into quiet. After bandaging him, I suddenly heard him say, "Alden, can I be your family? I don't want to lose you again." It felt like a drifting soul finally hearing its calling, a lonely heart beginning to beat once more. I nodded, "Okay."
And that's where this chapter novel us. With two people standing on opposite sides of the same truth, both hurting for reasons they never dared to name. What struck me most in this story is how quiet the emotions are. Alden spends 10 years loving someone from the shadows, convincing himself that betas don't deserve things like hope. Meanwhile, Lucen, cold, distant, seemingly unshakable, turns out to be the one who depended on Alden the most. Their tragedy isn't built from grand betrayal, but from tiny misunderstandings, one after another, until the distance becomes unbearable. I think the author did a brilliant job turning something simple, unspoken feelings, into something suffocating. Every detail, every hesitation, every silence carries weight. And the moment Lucen arrives in the rain, that was the first time he finally stopped running from his own heart. Too late, maybe, but powerful. But the story also exposes its flaws in a very human way. Lucen's blindness to Alden's pain feels frustrating, almost infuriating. Alden's self-denial sometimes makes you want to shake him and say, just tell him the truth. But maybe that's what makes the story so real. People don't always communicate, even when everything depends on it. Now I'm curious what you think. Do you believe Lucen deserves a second chance? Should Alden protect the life growing inside him and walk away for good? Or, is this the kind of heartbreak that can still be repaired? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what moved you, what angered you.